What is going on, everyone? Casey Adams here. Welcome back to my channel. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about what I learned from interviewing 6 billionaires in 6 months. So let's get into it. Over the past 3 years, I've hosted my podcast, Rise of the Young, in which I sit down with powerful CEOs and executives. About a year ago, I was given the opportunity to interview my first billionaire, in which we'll get into. And after that, I was thinking to myself, I want to interview more billionaires. There's only 2,095 billionaires in the world as of March 2020, according to an article I read on Google. But with that being said, I was like, billionaires are some of the most powerful people in the world. How can I interview more of them? And this wasn't something where I was looking to get anything from them. I genuinely wanted to get deep into the mind of a billionaire. And on today's video, as you know, we're going to be going over what I personally learned from my 6 interviews with 6 billionaires in 2020. Now, let's get into it. So the first billionaire I interviewed was Tillman Fertitta. He is the owner of the NBA's Houston Rockets, as well as the owner of Laundries, Inc. After I interviewed Tillman, we went to a special private dinner at Mastro's Beverly Hills, and it was for his book that came out called Shut Up and Listen. He actually signed it, so shout out to Tillman. But the 2 things that I learned from Tillman Fertitta were this. The first thing relates to his rule called the 95-5 rule. And what he means by this is, if you're in business, you need to focus on the 5% of things that may go wrong. The 5% of things that a customer could hate you for. So for example, what he talked about was, for example, if you bring a glass of water to the table without a napkin, that's the 5% he's going to focus on to make sure that every customer has a great experience. Another thing that he talks about is trash in the parking lot. And what I mean by this is, Tillman, he owns dozens of restaurants all over the world. And even when I was with him, I saw him bend over and pick up a small piece of trash. And when I read the book and he talked about the 95-5 rule, it really hit me because he was practicing what he was preaching. And I have not only learned that from Tillman, but I've applied it in my life. And I highly recommend you do as well, because every time I see a little piece of trash on the ground or a water bottle, which is common sense to a lot of people, pick it up and throw it away. And he was telling that point to go back to his rule of 95-5. And if you're out there and you own a business or you're doing anything in life that is moving you forward, focus on the 5% of things that the customer could hate you for, or the 5% of things that are holding you back. Because if you focus on those, the 95% will get taken care of. So the second billionaire I interviewed was John Oringer, the CEO and founder of Shutterstock. If you don't know what Shutterstock is, it is a provider of stock images, videos, and music. Chances are, if you're watching this video, you know what Shutterstock is. So when I interviewed John Oringer, we talked about his journey as an entrepreneur, and the 2 things that I learned from John that I will always remember are this. So the first thing I learned from John Oringer is limit the amount of capital you take into your company to only what you need. And if you're out there and you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, you understand investing or taking in investments. And what he meant when he said this was, when you're raising capital, only take in what you need, build what you need with that, utilize it, and see how far it can get you. Stretch the dollar. Don't over capitalize your business when you're going to dilute yourself. Raise what you need and be strategic. My second point to what I learned from John Oringer is limit your dilution. He talked about this a lot in our podcast. And if you haven't seen it, make sure you go check it out. But if you're not familiar with dilution, here's what it is. Dilution occurs when a company issues new stock, which results in a decrease of an existing shareholder's ownership percentage of that company. So if you're an entrepreneur, you know that you want to retain as much equity as possible. And that is John Oringer's advice to any entrepreneur out there. Limit your dilution. So the third billionaire that I interviewed this year was Joe Foster, the founder of Reebok. He is 85 years old. And in 2006, Reebok sold to Adidas for $3.8 billion. So after I interviewed Joe Foster, he shipped me his new book called Shoemaker, and he actually gave me a signed copy, which is pretty cool. I'm not sure if you can see that, but Joe Foster was an absolute incredible individual. And like I said, he's 85 years old. He's sharp as a knife. And this is what I learned from him. So the first thing that I learned from Joe Foster was this: keep going and never give up. But most importantly, recognize opportunities. And when he said that, it really struck a chord with me because we all have opportunities in our life that come and go and you don't even know. I remember when I was 18 years old, I was about to move to Scottsdale, Arizona from Virginia, and I decided to take that opportunity to move across the country with my friends and for a business opportunity, and we picked up everything and we moved. And 2 years later, I just moved here to California, and without that opportunity to move to Arizona, I'm not sure where I would be right now. And I think Joe Foster really hit the nail on that one because he talked about his journey of not only taking on the family business, which turned into Reebok, but recognizing the opportunity that the sneaker market was going through during that time in the 80s. The second thing that I learned from Joe Foster was this: have passion for what you're doing. So one thing that Joe Foster said during our interview was, it has to be something that we live for every single day. That's what he said about Reebok. And when he said that, it made me smile, not only because you can still feel his passion as not only an entrepreneur, but why he started Reebok, which is now a legacy brand. And the way he talked about that, and if you haven't heard the podcast, make sure you check it out. I'll make sure to link it down below. But that was one of the most important things that I took away from that interview. And I'm going to say it again: be passionate about what you're doing and just keep going, but make sure you recognize opportunities that are in front of you. Okay, so the fourth billionaire that I interviewed this year was GT Dave, known for GT's Kombucha. He was the first person to bring kombucha to the glass bottle into a store, and his family was brewing kombucha for years. He decided to pick it up at 14, 15 years old, and now he's a billionaire. One of the most important things that I learned from GT Dave was this: keep it simple and don't overcomplicate things. When GT Dave was a young guy, he knew one thing, that he loved kombucha. He loved the way it made him feel. And he decided to start a business, which was bottling kombucha. He was the first person to bring kombucha into Erewhon's and many other retailers. But I think it's pretty simple, you know? Keep it simple and follow your gut. That's what he said during our podcast. So the second thing that I learned from GT Dave was don't be greedy. And if you haven't heard my interview with GT Dave, I will also make sure to link that down below so that you can check it out. And comment down below, do you like kombucha? I actually used to hate kombucha, and then I decided to try it again before I interviewed GT Dave after I booked it. And I ended up loving it, and I've been buying it ever since for the last couple of months. So if you haven't tried kombucha, make sure you check it out. It's solid. All right, so that brings me to the fifth billionaire that I've interviewed this year, which is the one and only Tim Draper. Okay, so if you don't know who Tim Draper is, I'm going to go ahead and read off his bio because it is quite long. Tim Draper is an American venture capital investor and founder of Draper University. His most prominent investments include Baidu, Hotmail, Skype, Tesla, SpaceX, AngelList, SolarCity, Ring, Twitter, DocuSign, Coinbase, Robinhood, Ancestry.com, Twitch, Cruise Automation, and Focus Media. If that isn't a bio, then I don't know what is. But also, Tim Draper owns over 30,000 Bitcoins, I believe it is, and he is a billionaire. And what I learned from Tim Draper is this. So before I ended my interview with Tim Draper, I asked him, what's your advice to a young entrepreneur today? And this is what he said. The first thing he asked me was, what do you want to do with your life? The second thing he asked me was, what's the big problem you're looking to solve? And he asked me, what's the business that will solve that problem? When Tim Draper and I started talking about these three questions, it made me think, and I want you to think about this. What do you want to do with your life? What problem are you looking to solve? What business will solve that problem? He broke it down in a very simple way, and whenever I'm off track, I try to reflect on those simple three questions, and I would highly advise you to do that as well. Last but not least, the sixth billionaire that I've interviewed this year was Ernie Bach. Ernie Bach is the CEO of Bach Enterprises, which mainly consists of automotive dealerships all over Massachusetts. And in our interview, I actually had my good friend Kieran O'Brien with me because he's an automotive junkie. And here's what I learned. So the first thing that I learned from Ernie Bach was this: don't stop and never stop. And he went on a rant about what that means to him. And that leads me to the second point of what I learned from Ernie Bach, which is don't listen to the negativity and haters in your life. And if you go back and listen to my interview with Ernie Bach, you can hear the passion in his voice when he says this. And he says, if I listened to people growing up, I would have ended up living in a trailer park. But now he's a billionaire because he didn't listen to the haters, he didn't listen to the negative people in his life, and he went all in on what he's passionate about. So there you have it, the lessons that I learned from 6 billionaires in 6 months. Please, if you're new here, take a moment to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment below what billionaire would you like to see me interview, because I have a goal. And if you can help me with this, make sure you DM me on Instagram and let me know how you can help. It's just @Casey. My goal is to interview 100 billionaires by the time I'm 25 years old. Right now, I'm 20 and I have 5 years to go. So if we do the math on that, that is 20 billionaires every single year. My goal is to finish this year with 12 billionaires. I'm at 8 right now, but in this video, I decided to break down the 6 things that I learned from 6 billionaires in 6 months. So with that being said, thank you so much for tuning into today's video. If you haven't already, again, make sure you subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.